Hello, welcome, Cabbage here. So, Shutdown for the global servers of Final Fantasy Brave Exvius War of the Visions was announced. I can take a video to shoot down some misconceptions surrounding the shutdown, look at the financials for a few Square Enix mobile games, and reflect on what I liked and did not like about the game, War of the Visions. But before all that, I want to ask some questions to the folks that are still playing the game. I stopped after they introduced the Dream Upgrade system and the Trust Stones. How did those systems play out? Did the developers later make them easier to do and manage? And then did the systems have a significant effect on PvP and PvE? Were there any new systems added since then? And then how did Global catching up to JP play out? How is the story? Is the story actually going anywhere, or is it just spinning its wheels? Did they add any real maps? And then how about game modes? Are the long-running ones like Tower still fun? Are the Esper fights fun? Is the new Reliquary mode fun? And then are there any new game modes beyond those? Alright, that'll do it for the questions. Let's get into this video and do the misconceptions first. I took a quick look at the comment section of YouTube and then Reddit and stuff, and I saw a lot of the same things I see with every global server shutdown. We can do a lightning round here. Money getting refunded? No. Global accounts getting transferred to JP? No. Offline version coming? No. Square Enix changing their mind because of a petition? No. Square Enix shutting down Global because they're lazy or they hate global players? No. And then I see some talk about Global not getting the end of the story. I should point out that most JP mobile games do not get the end of their story either, to say nothing of the global versions. I've talked about this multiple times, but the vast majority of games aim to last as long as it is financially feasible, while a tiny fraction of games are pre-planned to end with the conclusion of the story, a la Near Reincarnation. At least that was my theory about that game. That's why the stories of most mobile games just drag things out on and on and on. They need something flexible and inconclusive, while introducing new MacGuffins and new characters and new settings, in order to prolong the story in case the game is successful enough to continue. Speaking of successes, War of the Visions Global as a mobile game is a success. The average mobile game lifespan in Japan is under a year. The average Square Enix mobile game lifespan in Japan is about 3 years, and War of the Visions Global went over 5 years. That's amazing. Could things for Global have been handled better? Of course, but in the big picture, I think there's a lot to be grateful for about that game. Next, let's look at the financials alongside some other Final Fantasy Square Enix mobile titles. As I've explained in previous financials videos, these numbers are based on Apple App Store sales rankings in Japan. Global sales are rarely worth mentioning, especially with Square Enix games. It's more of a matter whether or not the JP version is making enough to subsidize Global. First is War of the Visions. Sales for 2025 are so far similar to 2024, where the high month was just under 2 million USD and the low months was around 800k USD. That's skimming the danger zone, as I call it, the place where many other mobile games with similar numbers have shut down. 2024 was down 20% overall from 2023, a downward trend that has continued from launch. How much longer will War of the Visions last in Japan? It's not looking good, and they may aim to end it with the conclusion of the current story arc. People can fill me in there what that looks like. Next, let's talk about FFBE, Global Shutdown in 2024. Looking at the numbers and seeing how they compare to War of the Visions, they are worse overall than War of the Visions and have been since 2020. So JP FFBE looks in more trouble than War of the Visions to shut down, but since it has been in the danger zone for so long, I think that Square Enix considers it like their pet game, which they would make every exception for. I know some people will point to FFBE as establishing a rule for where the danger zone is, but it is definitely the exception. It will not signal the norm. And then lastly, let's look at Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. It's strong, as usual. It will sail into its 2nd anniversary, and I would even say it has an 80% chance to make it to its 3rd anniversary. The only thing that would shut it down is some cataclysmic decision like Square Enix decides to stop all mobile game development and support immediately in response to their stock tanking to zero or something like that. The numbers are dipping year over year, but in 2025 they're still making 2.5 million, 1.3 million, and 1.7 million in January, February, and March respectively. decent numbers. The big question with Ever Crisis is, can it last until the release of the third remake game? That is undoubtedly the aim of the developers, and it's looking good now, but let's check in 6 months, and also, let's keep an eye on the release date of the PlayStation 6, and watch for any signs that Final Fantasy VII Remake 3 would be an exclusive for that console. I'm guessing not, but that's a topic for another video. If you were thinking of migrating from War of the Visions to Ever Crisis, I think you have at least a good year and a half with that game. So those are the numbers. Ever Crisis looks healthy, War of the Visions JP must be on the chopping block, and FFBE JP is unknown and unknowable. It is doing its own thing. Finally, let's look back on my time with War of the Visions. I won't go over like the total history of the game like I did with Nier Reincarnation. I didn't play War of the Visions through to the end, so I can't speak to it. And I won't say goodbye to the game. I did that already in another video, I'll link to that below. But here I will reiterate the number one reason why I stopped playing War of the Visions. And it was the game's focus on PvP and its failure with PvE. Not to say the PvP was bad in War of the Visions, it was in fact very good when I left the game. It's just that I know the type of gamer that I am, and I know that I do not enjoy PvP and that I am not competitive. I am dispassionately impressed Square Enix was able to make a PvP-focused mobile game work in Japan. That's not easy, but it wasn't the game for me. And on the flip side, the PvE modes were not taking full advantage of the fact that the game was isometric tactics. I've spoken about this many times, but there are ways to make the map interesting, with like environmental hazards or boss attacks that telegraph an area so that you can avoid it, or clear missions other than kill everything, but the game rarely did it. It just got to be too frustrating to wait for it year after year. And finally, this is a kind of a more minor reason, the story and the world of the game never truly clicked for me because they never introduced a real map, or real history, or real mythology. Those all might sound like minor quibbles, but War of the Visions always seemed to be going for hard world building, but they never put in the actual hard work of doing it by really defining the world through geography or history or mythology. It was entirely character-based, which is not enough for me in an epic fantasy setting. Alright, but those are my thoughts on Final Fantasy Brave Exvius War of the Visions at the announcement of the closing of the global servers. It was a good game, it was a successful game. I made a lot of memories playing it and covering it. And let me know what you're thinking about the game as it is coming close to shutdown. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again. Take care.